There comes a moment in many people's lives when something subtle yet deeply unsettling begins to unfold. The things that once brought you joy, music, food, conversation, even the hobbies you once felt so alive in, suddenly feel muted. Almost flavorless. It's as if life has been drained of color, and all that's left is a kind of emotional quietness you never asked for. And naturally, your mind panics. Is this depression? Is something wrong with me? Why can't I feel anything anymore? The fear that rises here is real, because you're not just losing interest, you're losing a familiar version of yourself. But what if this strange emptiness isn't a malfunction, but a transition? This is the possibility Alan Watts gently pointed toward. That the death you think you're experiencing is not the end of your capacity to feel, but the beginning of a new way of experiencing life, one that hasn't formed yet. Most of the joy we cling to in our earlier years isn't true joy at all. It's stimulation. It's the relief that comes from filling a want, scratching an itch, escaping a discomfort. We call it happiness, but it's more like a cycle of craving and temporary relief. And when you begin to see through that cycle, when your mind intuitively recognizes that the pleasures you chased were simply distractions dressed as fulfillment, something profound happens. The old joys stop working. Not because you're broken, but because you've outgrown them. Like someone whose eyes have just stepped out of a candle-lit room and into the sunlight. Everything feels too bright, too empty, too unfamiliar to enjoy. The shadows that once entertained you are gone, but your eyes haven't adjusted to the daylight yet. So you stand here, between two realities. The old world that no longer satisfies you, and the new world that hasn't yet revealed itself. It feels like loss, but it might actually be birth. A quiet, inconvenient, disorienting birth. The beginning of a deeper way of being alive. Seeing the truth, why your old joy was never real joy. There comes a moment on the inner journey when you begin to notice something unsettling. The old sources of joy simply stop working. And before we rush to conclusions, before we call it depression or emotional numbness, we have to look deeper at what those joys actually were. Because for most of us, what we used to call happiness was never true happiness at all. It was relief. Think about it. You're hungry, right pointing arrow, you eat, right pointing arrow, and you feel pleasure. But the pleasure isn't in the food, it's in the disappearance of hunger. You're lonely, right pointing arrow, someone notices you, right pointing arrow, and you feel joy. But that joy depends entirely on the loneliness that came before it. In everyday life, most of our positive emotions work this way. They rely on lack first, then satisfaction. Without the lack, the satisfaction doesn't exist. It's like scratching an itch. The scratch feels good only because the itch was there. This is what the Buddha meant when he said life is dukkha, often mistranslated as suffering. But more accurately, unsatisfactoriness. Not because life is misery, but because the cycle of wanting right pointing arrow, getting right pointing arrow, wanting again is inherently unstable. It can never deliver lasting fulfillment. And once you see that truth, not as an idea, but as a lived realization, something irreversible happens. The old pleasures lose their magic. Eating when you're not hungry isn't satisfying. Attention doesn't move you if you don't feel empty inside. Chasing distractions feels hollow once you realize they were only disguises for deeper discomfort. This is why people suddenly wake up one day and feel like nothing brings them joy anymore. It's not because the world has become dull. It's because your consciousness has outgrown the old game. The game of running from lack to find temporary relief and calling that happiness. You're beginning to sense, intuitively, that real joy cannot be built on the foundation of deficiency. And when this truth starts to dawn, the joys of the past fall away, not as a punishment, but as an invitation. An invitation into a deeper kind of aliveness you haven't met yet. When you see the truth, the old pleasure game collapses. There comes a moment in every awakening where something subtle, but irreversible, happens. You begin to see pleasure differently. Not as joy, not as fulfillment, but as a momentary relief from a tension that you, yourself, created. It's uncomfortable to admit this, but most of what we call happiness is nothing more than scratching an itch. Hunger gives you pleasure when you eat. Loneliness gives you pleasure when someone notices you. Stress gives you pleasure when you escape it for a brief moment. But without the itch, without the tension, the pleasure vanishes. And once you see this, once you truly recognize it in your bones, the entire game collapses. It's like discovering that your favorite magic trick was never real magic, just clever misdirection. You can't unsee the mechanism hiding behind the illusion. Alan Watts often compared this to addiction. The drug causes the withdrawal symptoms, and then the addict takes more of the drug to relieve the very symptoms the drug created. And the addict calls that feeling good. But once the illusion breaks, once you see the loop, you can no longer play the game with the same enthusiasm. The highs feel shallow. The excitement feels artificial. The stimulation that once pulled you forward no longer has the power to distract you. And you may start wondering, why don't these things work anymore? Why doesn't pleasure feel like pleasure? It's not because something is wrong with you. It's because something false inside you has fallen apart. This is the moment your consciousness begins to outgrow the old reward system. The endless cycle of wanting, getting, wanting again. The old pleasures don't vanish because life has become dull. They vanish because you no longer need them to feel alive. You're no longer hypnotized by stimulation. No longer seduced by the chase. No longer dependent on the next hit of excitement to feel like yourself. And though this collapse feels unsettling, even disorienting, it's actually the first sign that real, grounded joy, the kind that doesn't depend on craving, is preparing to emerge, stepping into the void, the most terrifying stage of awakening. There's a moment on the path of awakening that almost no one warns you about. A moment when life suddenly feels empty. Not painful, not dramatic, just strangely hollow. As if someone quietly turned off the emotional switch inside you. It's unsettling because it feels like something essential has died. Food has no taste. Conversations feel flat. Music loses its soul. You look at the things that once lit you up, and now they appear distant, muted, as though you're watching your own life from behind a layer of glass. But here's the paradox. This death you're experiencing isn't an ending. It's the beginning of something your mind hasn't yet adjusted to. Alan Watts described this transition beautifully through a simple image. Imagine living your entire life in a room lit by candles. The candlelight creates shadows, dancing shapes on the walls that entertain you, comfort you, fascinate you. These shadows are your old joys, the familiar pleasures, the excitements, the little highs. Now imagine someone suddenly opens a door, and pure daylight floods in. At first, the brightness hurts your eyes. Everything looks washed out, colorless, almost frightening in its intensity. And worst of all, the shadows, everything you once enjoyed, disappear instantly. You look around and wonder, why does everything feel so empty? Why can't I enjoy anything anymore? But the problem isn't that the world has lost its color. It's that your eyes haven't adjusted to the new light. This is the void, the in-between stage when the old way of experiencing life has dissolved. But the new way hasn't fully come online yet. It feels like emotional numbness, like losing your identity, like drifting through life with no anchor. But in truth, what's dying is not your capacity to feel. What's dying is the old structure of feeling. The dependency on shadows, on stimulation, on external sparks. You are not breaking. You are recalibrating. And this empty, colorless silence is the space where real joy, deeper, quieter, more authentic, will eventually be born. The common mistake, trying to bring back the old joy. When people realize that nothing excites them the way it used to, the first instinct is almost always the same. Try harder. Try to revive the old spark. Try to force joy back into their lives by adding more noise, more stimulation, more intensity. So they start chasing new hobbies, new relationships, new adventures, anything that promises a fresh hit of excitement. They turn up the volume on their music, Seek out extreme experiences. Jump into sensory overload as if the answer lies in something louder, bigger, more dramatic. But here's the quiet truth we rarely acknowledge. The problem was never a lack of stimulation. The problem is that stimulation itself has stopped working. And trying to fix this by adding more excitement is like trying to cure thirst by drinking seawater. It feels like relief for a moment, but it only deepens the dryness. This is where many people get stuck. They believe the emptiness they're feeling is a sign that they need more. More travel, more entertainment, more passion, more adventure. But the emptiness isn't asking for more. It's asking for less. Less distraction. Less noise. Less running away from yourself. Alan Watts once said that our desperate search for intense experiences is nothing but the ego trying to reassure itself that it is still alive. But awakening is not about making the ego feel alive. It's about seeing through the ego entirely. And when you're in this transition, where the old pleasures have collapsed but the new way of being hasn't fully formed, your system is incredibly sensitive. Throwing more stimulation at it doesn't revive you, it overwhelms you. It makes the emptiness feel heavier, the disconnection more painful. Because the truth is this: you cannot return to the old joy. You're trying to breathe life into a version of yourself that no longer exists. The collapse is not the problem. Your resistance to it is. When you stop trying to resurrect the past, you finally make space for something deeper, steadier, quieter. A form of joy that doesn't depend on excitement, but on presence. The new joy, peace instead of pleasure. There comes a moment, quiet, almost unnoticeable, when something shifts inside you. It doesn't arrive with fireworks. It doesn't feel like the joy you've been taught to expect. In fact, at first, you might not recognize it at all. Because what you're discovering isn't happiness in the old sense. It isn't excitement. It isn't passion. It isn't that burst of pleasure that rises and falls, leaving you hungry again. It's something far more subtle and far more enduring. It's a simple sense of okayness. A soft, steady hum beneath everything you experience. Not good, not bad, not amazing, not terrible. Just okay. And the remarkable thing about this okayness is that it doesn't depend on conditions. It doesn't disappear when life gets difficult. It doesn't rely on stimulation or contrast or pleasure. It's not born from escaping discomfort. It's present even in the middle of it. Think about that for a moment. A joy that doesn't vanish when things go wrong. A peace that doesn't require a perfect life. A state of being that remains steady, even when the world is not. This is the beginning of wisdom. The first taste of genuine presence. The doorway to spiritual awakening. Because for the first time, you're not chasing anything. You're not begging life to entertain you. You're not demanding that each moment be pleasurable in order to feel alive. You are simply here, with this breath, this sensation, this unfolding moment. And somehow, inexplicably, it's enough. This is the peace the mystics have spoken about for centuries. The peace that isn't the opposite of chaos, but the space in which chaos arises. The peace that doesn't come and go with circumstance. The peace that was always here, quietly waiting beneath the noise of your desires. You haven't lost joy. You've outgrown the version of joy that depended on craving and relief. And now you're beginning to touch something deeper. A joy that doesn't burn out. A joy that doesn't collapse. A joy that doesn't need to be chased. A joy that simply is. Why we don't recognize this new joy? It's curious, isn't it? You finally touch a deeper kind of peace, a quiet, steady presence, and yet, you don't realize it. You overlook it. You dismiss it. You even think something is wrong. Why does this happen? Because the new joy doesn't look anything like the joy you're used to chasing. It's not dramatic. It's not electrifying. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or that familiar rush of dopamine. It doesn't feel like a high. In fact, it feels almost too simple, too gentle, so gentle that the mind barely registers it. You see, the mind is addicted to stimulation. It's been trained for years, maybe decades, to believe that joy must be intense to be real. It must be loud, colorful, emotionally overwhelming. It must shake you, move you, excite you. So when something quieter appears, something soft, something stable, something without the usual emotional spikes, the mind says, this can't be joy, this is nothing. But it's not nothing. It's everything you've been running toward without knowing it. Think of a person who has lived all their life in a storm. Thunder, lightning, noise. To them, silence feels strange, uncomfortable, almost frightening. They mistake calm for emptiness, and peace for boredom, simply because they've never known life without chaos. That's exactly what happens spiritually. The peace you're beginning to feel, the okayness beneath all things, doesn't match your old idea of happiness. So your mind ignores it. It keeps waiting for a rush, a thrill, a spark. It keeps wanting the old pattern of craving and relief. But the truth is, the new joy is not loud. It's not flashy. It doesn't try to impress you. It's a presence, a groundedness, a quiet sense that life is enough as it is. And here's the paradox. You won't recognize this new joy until you stop chasing the old one. Only when the mind becomes still enough to feel what's already here, does this subtle, profound peace reveal itself. It was never missing. You were simply looking in the wrong direction. Letting go of the addiction to experience. There's something most people never realize about joy. We're not addicted to happiness itself. We're addicted to stimulation, to intensity, to emotional fireworks. We mistake this stimulation for life, for aliveness, for meaning. And when the stimulation fades, we panic and think, something is wrong, I've lost my spark, I've lost myself. But what if the truth is far simpler and far more profound? Most of us are addicted to experiences the way others are addicted to substances. We crave the high of emotional peaks, the thrill of novelty, the rush of excitement. We want music that shakes us, relationships that overwhelm us, adventures that jolt us awake. We're taught to believe that feeling deeply means feeling dramatically. So when life becomes quiet, when things feel flat or neutral, we assume we've lost something. We assume something is broken inside us. But what if this flatness isn't the absence of life? What if it's the absence of stimulation? There's a big difference. Think of someone coming off caffeine after years of drinking it daily. Suddenly, they feel exhausted, lifeless, empty. Not because life has lost its energy, but because they're finally confronting life without artificial highs. That's what's happening spiritually. You're not losing joy. You're losing your dependency on emotional adrenaline. You're detoxing from intensity. And detox never feels good. The mind says, I want the old highs back. It tries to recreate them. Stronger music, bigger thrills, deeper drama. Thinking that stimulation equals aliveness. But stimulation was never aliveness. It was distraction. A temporary surge masking a deeper emptiness you didn't want to face. Now that the noise has settled, you're meeting yourself without the anesthetic, without the emotional sugar rush, without the highs and lows that once defined your days. This neutrality you feel, this strange sense of nothingness, is not a spiritual failure. It's the beginning of sobriety. It's what remains when you stop chasing experiences to avoid being present. It's the quiet space where a deeper, more genuine form of joy begins to grow. Not dramatic, not explosive, but steady, grounded, and real. You didn't lose your joy. You're simply learning how to live without the noise. Embracing the emptiness, the caterpillar stage of transformation. There's a stage in spiritual growth that almost no one talks about. A stage that feels so strange, so disorienting, that many people assume something has gone terribly wrong. It's the moment when your old self has dissolved, but your new self hasn't yet emerged. Alan Watts often compared this to what happens inside a cocoon. We tend to imagine a caterpillar slowly growing wings, gracefully turning into a butterfly. But that's not what really happens. The caterpillar disintegrates. It becomes a kind of biological soup, formless, directionless, unrecognizable. If that mush could think, it would probably panic. What's happening to me? Why can't I go back to the way things were? Why do I feel like nothing at all? And that is exactly what you're experiencing. You're no longer the person you used to be. The one who chased old pleasures, old identities, old patterns. But you're not yet the person you're becoming. You're in between. Suspended. Unshaped. This is why so many people in awakening describe a sense of emptiness, numbness, or disconnection. Not because they've failed, but because their former structure has fallen away. The shell has cracked. The familiar scaffolding of the self has collapsed. And in this space, there is nothing solid to hold on to. It feels like death, but it's not a death. It's a metamorphosis. The mind panics and says, "Can I go back?" But you can't. The caterpillar can never return to crawling. Once the process begins, the only direction is forward. Through the discomfort, through the uncertainty, through the formlessness. What you're feeling isn't brokenness. It's evolution taking place in real time. Every transformation requires a period of dissolution. A moment when the old identity melts. When nothing feels familiar. When even joy seems to vanish. This emptiness isn't a void to escape. It's the fertile space where a new consciousness forms. You're not lost. You're becoming. And if you stay with the process, patiently, gently, without rushing, you'll eventually discover your wings were growing all along. How to navigate the emptiness, practicing presence in the transition. When you enter this strange in-between stage, the space where old joys have faded and new joys haven't yet appeared, there's a natural temptation to fix yourself. To force excitement. To make yourself feel alive again. But here's the truth no one tells you. You can't force a flower to bloom by pulling on its petals. And you can't force yourself back into an old version of joy that no longer fits who you're becoming. So instead of trying to revive the past, this stage asks something very different from you. Something quieter, gentler, far more honest. It asks you to simply do what needs to be done. You brush your teeth. You make your meal. You answer the email. Not with the expectation that these things should spark joy, but because they are what life has placed in front of you. This simplicity is not resignation. It is presence. And as you move through your days, another practice becomes essential. Stop comparing yourself to who you used to be. Comparison is the mind's way of clinging to the past, of insisting that life must feel the way it once felt. But the past is gone. The self that experienced those joys is gone too. Instead, become curious. Watch your emotions the way you'd watch clouds drifting through a wide open sky. Not judging them, not trying to change them, not wrestling them into something else. Just noticing. What is this feeling? Where does it sit in my body? What happens if I stop resisting it? Curiosity softens the fear. It allows the emptiness to be what it is. A temporary weather pattern passing through the landscape of your consciousness. And above all, accept the emptiness as something natural. Not a flaw. Not a failure. But a phase. A doorway. A cleansing silence preparing you for a new way of experiencing life. You don't need to fix this stage. You only need to witness it. Because what feels like emptiness now is simply the space being cleared for who you're becoming next. When losing joy becomes the most unexpected gift, there comes a moment on the inner journey when the joys you once relied on, the excitements, the pleasures, the rushes, simply stop working. And it feels like something has been stolen from you. Like a light has gone out. Or like you've somehow forgotten how to feel alive. But what if this loss isn't a tragedy? What if it's a gift, an invisible blessing wrapped in fear? Because when the old joy dies, it's not your heart shutting down. It's your consciousness outgrowing its addictions. You're not losing your ability to feel. You're shedding a version of joy that was never sustainable. The kind of happiness that depends on stimulation, novelty, relief, and distraction. The happiness that rises only when a craving is satisfied, and disappears the moment the craving returns. This death of old joy is the moment you stop chasing highs like a spiritual addict. It's the moment your system says, no more. You're meant for something deeper. And that something deeper is not excitement. It's not euphoria. It's not the buzz you used to run after. It's presence. A quiet fullness. A natural sense of enoughness. That isn't created by experiences, but revealed when the chasing ends. Think of it like this. A child finds joy in candy. An adult finds joy in accomplishment. But the soul finds joy in simply being. So when nothing brings you joy anymore, don't assume you've lost something. Consider that you may have outgrown something. The old joys have collapsed because they were too small for you now. Too shallow for the depth you've stepped into. Too temporary for the consciousness you're expanding into. And this emptiness you feel, it isn't a void. It's a doorway. A quiet invitation into a deeper, steadier, more truthful form of aliveness. One that doesn't need pleasure to feel whole. One that doesn't need stimulation to feel awake. The end of your old joy is simply the beginning of your real peace.